Hi there. In this section, we're going to define a security policy. In these videos, we'll create a simple policy for the entire site, and then we're going to plug in an in-memory set of users with various roles for test purposes. In this specific video, we're going to secure our site with a simple policy. We'll add Spring Security to the build, and then we'll create a bare-bones security policy that secures the entire site and only allows authenticated users to access it. We'll hook up TimeLeaf's Spring Security dialect to copy user details into the user interface. Now to get started, we need to add Spring Security to the build. So let's go open up our Gradle file. So we're going to add one more Spring Boot starter. Spring Boot Starter Security. Now let's go refresh our Gradle tab so we make sure that it's pulled into the project. With that in place, we can now build our security policy, and to do that, we only need a single class. So we're going to create a Spring Configuration class. And in this case, what we want to do is we're going to extend Spring Security's Web Security Configurer Adapter. What this does is it gives us a whole bunch of pre-built components we need for security, and then we can just extend the key parts needed. In this case, we want to override the configure HTTP method. What this does is it gives us a hold of the entire policy here through this builder object, this Fluent API. So we're going to start off and declare that how we want to authorize all requests. We're going to say that any request that comes in has to be authenticated. And we want to use form-based authentication. And we want to be sure to indicate that the login form itself, we've granted permissions on. So in this case, the form login does not require authentication. That would be tricky to log in if we were not logged in. So far, we've got a security policy written. However, we want to dress up the user interface a little bit. For instance, we'd like to display the user's name and their assigned roles. Since we're using TimeLeaf as our template engine of choice, we need to add the Spring Security dialect of TimeLeaf to our build. So let's go back to our Gradle file. We're going to add this extras module, TimeLeaf, extras, Spring Security 4. Now they do have support for Spring Security 3, but if we check our dependencies down here amongst Spring, you're going to see that we're using Spring Security 4.0.4, so we need version 4 here. Let me shrink this back down. Not that anymore. Now with that set up, let's go refresh the Gradle tab and verify our build step here. We should be able to go verify that we now have that extra TimeLeaf dependency here. Yep, here it is. TimeLeaf extras Spring Security 4. Perfect. All right, so let's open up our template file. Now the first thing we want to do is they put all the stuff in a default namespace called SEC for security. So we want to make sure we capture it up here. Okay, now down here, what I want to put at the top of the page, let's put a top level header. How about the Learning Spring Boot video? It's a descriptor page, but above that I'm going to create a little div, and this is where I'm going to put our user data at. So now with the namespace I can get this completion factor, so I can get a hold of the authentication object. That's all the credential data that's provided and access its properties. So I'm going to say give me the name. So and so has authorities. Notice how it kindly gives us access to exactly what's available. So this should show us, who has what permission when they're in the website. The last thing we want to tack on here is a log out button so we can easily exit the thing. And we're going to register an action. Now it's important to point out that, we're using, it comes with some standard log out locations, like it expects a login to be at a certain location, log out at a certain location. But with Spring Security, you can actually go in and tailor it all. You can override these settings if you want to. If you want to use a different convention, or perhaps you're emulating an existing dated application that you're trying to upgrade and replace. But we're going to go with the defaults for now. And don't forget, with inputs, you need to have that closing tag because TimeLeaf expects everything to have close tags. So that should do the trick. With that, we should be able to kick things off. Now we got to check something just scrolled past us here. We can see we have a default password that was randomly generated. We need to capture that now if we're going to get in. Okay, with that, let's go jump over to the browser. Now you notice how it redirected us into the /login page. Where did the login page come from? We didn't write that. It turns out Spring Security actually has a pre-written template for us. In fact, it's a form already written. You can go in and override the form and create it yourself to make it match the look and feel of your website. And if you're interested in that, I would suggest going to spring.io/guides and look at the security guide that's in there because it will show you how to do that. But for now, we're just going to accept the one out of the box. Now to log in, the default username is user, and we're pasting it in the randomly generated password. And we're in. Right up at the top, we can see our little tidbit that we put in. We can see that we have user has role admin and role user. And we can log back out. Log back in here. Now, something that it's important to realize is that so far, all we've done is enable authentication. That means to access the system, users have to identify who they are, and that's where we had to supply a username and a password. However, there's no authorization going on. What that means is there's no fine-grained controls on what you're allowed to do. Instead, essentially, it's letting you in, and then you can do anything that you want. I can go in and start deleting images. I can choose a file here and upload it. And at this point, I'm past the security barriers and I'm in. So to actually add more controls and to give us a much more comprehensive control over everything, we're going to tackle that in the next video. So far in this video, we added Spring Security and TimeLeaf's Spring Security dialect to our build, and then we wrote a fairly simple site-wide policy to enable user authentication.